Okay, the records are now open. Okay. Actually, this is kind of a surprise. Might be a surprise to you. It's definitely a surprise to me. You're actually a starseed. Okay, so your soul didn't originate from Earth. So what starseed means is that you're having a human experience, or you've had several human experiences on Earth, but your soul actually originated from maybe a different star system or a different dimension, or something like that. Okay, and I actually think that your family does contain some star seeds. Okay, I think your dad's one of them. But this is just kind of indicating that you're actually very ancient souls. You've had experiences in different locations. Okay. Before, I think we all decided, oh, let's have these, spiritual or kind of physical experiences on Earth. So what I see is, I do think you and your dad and maybe some other people in your family group came from the same soul group. Okay. But unlike your dad, I think you only had incarnations in Sirius. Your dad, I think, originated from Lyra, and then during the Lyra Draconian Wars, there was this horrible wars that occurred there, and that destroyed that star system, and then everybody kind of dispersed out into the galaxy. Okay, so you don't carry the same trauma signatures as your dad does. Okay, so this in some ways makes you a little bit more of a hardier soul, or maybe just have less karma or less trauma to work through. Okay, and I think maybe your soul chose this because of the mission that you took on. So you took on, this mission of, hey, I'm going to be a leader and I'm going to be guiding people, through a certain process. Okay, we'll talk about that more, later in the reading. So let's look at your birth date. You were born in 1976. I don't know if you're familiar with Dolores Cannon. She was a very famous hypnotherapist who wrote quite a few books, some of which I have in my library. But the book I'm going to be referring to is called The Three Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth. So basically when she was doing hypnotherapy, she started realizing that when she was putting people under, they were telling her, I'm not from here originally. I'm from this system or that system. And she must have been a really good hypnotherapist to get that kind of information out of people. But she started realizing that there was 3 different generations of souls that came from other locations that decided to incarnate on Earth during this particular time period. So that's why she called them the 3 waves. And I'm a first waver. Your dad's a first waver too. So what this means is we were born between 1946 through the late 60s. Okay. So that's the first generation. We tend to be way showers and teachers, so that's our energy. You're more second wave. So you were born in the 70s and 80s. So you're what we would classify as a true indigo child. I don't know if you've heard that terminology before. They're a little bit more rebellious, more of a spiritual warrior energy. Okay, a little bit more, a stronger, maybe physically or emotionally stronger personality than the blue rays that came before them. Okay, and they're system changers. Okay, so you came here to be a system buster. So you're here to change the overall system. Okay, so you're not following the status quo. Now, I think in your case, you did work in corporate world for quite a few years to understand, the corporate structure. Okay, but you're not going to be, I think, pushing the corporate structure forward. You're going to, as it exists now, you're going to be changing it. Okay, so that's, I think, your role. Okay. And we'll talk about that more when we get closer to the Earth section of this reading. But so let's kind of go back to your origination. Okay. So For some reason, you as a soul, you were from the original Lyra Vega soul group, but you never incarnated into Lyra. Okay, so you never experienced this utopia that Lyra was, that ended up getting destroyed by draconian beings in the Draco star system. Okay. However, you did choose to incarnate as one of the very first. Let me see if I can explain this. So when Sirius was formed, okay, so I'm seeing definitely Sirian origin. So Sirius, okay, Sirius is a star in the constellation of Canis Major. Okay, so Canis Major is the big dog. Okay. It's a very important star system. It's the brightest star in our night sky. So you can no matter how cloudy the sky is, you're always going to see Sirius. It's that bright. And it looks like kind of a whitish bluish star when you look at it in the sky. Okay. Sirius was important to, I think, many ancient people here on Earth because it represented, I think there was actually quite a few beings from Sirius that were involved with Earth's history, but then it also represented, I think, our spiritual sun. So during the time when it's closest to Earth is usually towards the latter part of summer. So they used to call that the dog days of summer because Sirius is the dog star. And it has many. It's also called the Lion's Gate because that was the period when it was closest to Earth. But interestingly enough, I've done thousands of these readings, and a lot of people from Sirius choose to incarnate as water signs for some reason. So they're either Cancerians, Pisces, or Scorpio, because Sirius had very watery planets. It was considered to be a very watery, star system. Mostly mother goddess consciousness oriented, so Sirius was more of a feminine star system than a masculine star system. Okay, but kind of going back to why you decided to incarnate on Sirius, you came here to represent new beginnings. Okay, so when the refugees from the Lyra Draconian Wars escaped to Sirius, there was some that escaped from Vega, which was the biggest star in Lyra, and some that escaped from the other stars of Lyra. But there was two different human races. So there was the blue Vega race that was more the mother goddess consciousness human race, and then there was the white Lyrans that were more the father god consciousness group. For the first time ever, they were in one planet, one location. They decided, we're gonna band together as one race. We're no longer gonna be two different races. We're gonna intermarry and intermix with each other. So you came in as the representation of this really well integrated masculine and feminine energy. Okay, so you wanted to represent the new Sirian race. So you were like the progeny probably of maybe a Vega parent and a Lyran parent that intermarried with each other. Okay. Now, if you were to see what Sirians look like, they look mostly human, except because they were a mix of blue-skinned and white-skinned people, they had light blue skin. Okay, they kind of light blue skin, but for the most part, they looked pretty human. And so you're of humanoid genetics. Okay. Kind of what I'm seeing is with you is, I think you were always involved with technology and administration. Okay, it was like those are kind of like, so you didn't follow the typical Sirian path. Most Sirians are healers, so you see a lot of them that go into medicine. I get so many Sirian starseeds that are like, yeah, I'm a nurse or I'm a doctor. You see a lot of them, but they're also quite good in business because because they were mother goddess consciousness oriented culture, these people were very practical. Okay, so these were people that knew how to navigate through a physical reality. Okay, and so a lot of them knew that, hey, there's certain practical things you got to do in order to exist in a physical reality. So they understand finances, they understand business. Okay, they understand organization and sticking with, I think, like a structure of some sort. Okay. I am going to send you a recording. I did a podcast. I used to have a radio show a few years ago. I did a podcast on Sirian Starseed traits. I'll send you that podcast because I think it'll be really interesting. I think you'll... oh, bless you. Bless you. Bless you twice. I think you'll find, because it just talks about different traits that Sirian starseeds have. And I think you'll find that, oh, yeah, that kind of is like me, or it's about an hour and a half long. It's kind of long, but it's cool. So I'll send that along with your recording. But Sirian starseeds, they're a little bit more down to earth. Okay, so they're not like, pie in the sky, oh, I'm just going to follow my bliss, kind of people like, Pleiadian starseeds are. Sirian starseeds are a little bit more practical, okay? And kind of what I'm seeing with you as far as your Sirian lives is you were always pretty technical, okay? Yeah, you always had skill sets in technology. And I think initially you did some administrative work for the brand new Sirian council. So there was like these Sirian councils that were being developed. And I think as a young Sirian, you started off doing some administrative work, just kind of helping, not so much, maybe more kind of administrative, but I think you were just kind of getting your feet wet, just trying to learn how to, how to do like an actual work. And I think you set up appointments, and I think sometimes you would interact with the Sirian Starfleet. Okay, so Star Trek is actually based on reality, okay, which I think it's based on reality because when I look back on these star systems, they had very advanced technology, okay. Like only here on Earth did we kind of go backwards here on Earth. We actually had advanced technology in the beginning. So so I think initially you started off just kind of interplaying or interacting with the Starfleet, and then I think you decided, you know what, I kind of feel like I've done as much as I could, working for the council. I really want to have more expansive experiences, so I'm going to join or try to apply for, the Starfleet Academy. Okay, so you decided that, hey, I'm gonna join the Starfleet Academy, and I think, much of the work you did, I think, was very technical. Okay, not so much engineering, but maybe technical as far as computer systems. Okay, and so you joined. I think. By the time you graduated from the academy, you were, Starfleet officer. Okay, so you were involved with the Sirian branch of the Galactic Federation. Okay, so you were, so the Galactic Federation was like the United Federation of Planets that, we see in Star Trek, but so you were part of the Sirian branch, which was kind of like an alliance between, all these star races that had developed after the Lyra Draconian Wars. And their main purpose was to maintain peace and unity throughout the galaxy. And so you, I think, decided that, you wanted to be a part of that. You wanted to play a bigger role. Okay. And so I think this was the beginning of you training in leadership skill sets. Okay, so when you were going through the academy, you were learning to be a leader. And kind of what I'm seeing is I do think you had a connection. So I think actually, interestingly enough, you and your dad were connected in Sirius, but you were part of the same family group. But I don't think he was your dad in that lifetime. Okay, I think maybe he was a cousin or a brother, or he was not your father. He was, I think, probably a cousin. And I think he was also involved with the academy, but he did very different work. Okay, not quite as technical, maybe more mechanical. I don't know, but you two always kind of stayed in touch. You always had, kind of like this, this relationship, or this connection with each other. And in a way, he had more physical experiences or more physical incarnations than you did, because he did have incarnations in Lyra. But I think out of the two of you, I think you're the more gifted soul. Okay, I think you have many more, skill sets. Not that he's not gifted. I think he's got his own gifts, but I think you're more skilled as far as, the technical side of things. Okay. So sometimes you would do missions together, and sometimes you would be assigned to different missions. And I think purposely your soul chose not to have the Lyra experience, because you were trying to avoid trauma. You had to keep your karma very clear to do what you wanted to do. Okay. And kind of what I'm seeing throughout the various incarnations you had is that you always worked for the light. You were never like somebody that went on the dark side. Okay. At least not in your off-world lives. I don't know about your on-world lives, but we haven't gotten there yet. But as far as your off-world lives, you were always very, I think, attached to the mission. So you're always, and I think you're like that today. You're very mission oriented. You're very much, you set goals, and you're like, I'm setting this goal, and this is what I want to accomplish. And I think you've always been kind of single-minded that way, where it's kind of like, yeah, this is what I want to accomplish. Okay. So I do think, as far as even in your Sirian lives, I do think you oftentimes found that you were having to, I think, balance being, following your mission, or being part of the mission, which was to advance humanity, okay, in various ways. And then also, I think, honoring your divine feminine qualities. Okay, so that was very divine masculine, being part of the mission. But then you also wanted to have a family. You wanted to, honor your divine feminine, I think, qualities, which was to, be a mother and a wife, and to have, that kind of family connection that is very important to all of us. Okay, and that was quite the juggle if you were on board starships. I mean, I think that must have been, I think for a while, I think you were married, but I think it was hard to have children until, I think you finally decided to retire, okay, because you were just traveling so much. I'm seeing you did some scientific explorations of Orion and Procyon, and I think some of the kind of outlier star systems in that quadrant of the galaxy, and you also visited Earth quite a bit. Okay, so you visited Earth way back in Earth's history. Okay, with some, it was just scientific missions, like they were, I think, studying, I don't know, fauna and flora of Earth, or maybe they were trying to see if Earth was could be colonized. So Sirians have been involved with Earth for a long time. They kind of see Earth as like their little brother or sister. Like, oh, we're being guides, for this, younger star system. And I'm trying to see. Let's see. You did some Orion missions. That was Orion was difficult. Okay. I always like to compare Orion to Star Wars. So I don't know if you watched like the whole Star Wars series. Your dad's not into that kind of thing, but I am. But I like to watch those shows. But every time I watch Star Wars, I'm like, wow, that looks like the Orion Wars. That looks like. The whole Star Wars culture, everything about it reminds me of Orion. Orion is a huge constellation. And most of us are familiar with the Orion's belt, which is those 3 stars. Here's Sirius. If you look at the star map, here's Sirius, and here's the Orion's belt. So the Orion's belt's like real close to Sirius. So I think it made sense that, Sirius got involved with, I think, the Orion project. So what was going on in Orion was there was outlier stars in the Orion constellation that was of the dark. Okay, so these were draconian and gray alien outposts. They wanted to conquer the entire system. The belt stars were what I call the good zone. So that's where the people that wanted to maintain their freedom, that wanted to be, sovereign, were in the belt stars. They did not want to be overtaken by the Empire, okay, which was the, reptilian empire. So these people were always fighting against these other star systems, okay, trying to maintain their freedom. Because the people of the belt stars were part of the Federation, there was other star races that got involved in assisting them, okay, which included obviously the Sirians because they were really close. Sirians, Pleiadians, Andromedans, even some Arcturians got involved. And these were all these beings were all us. They were all us in a previous lifetime. It was us. That was getting involved with these situations. And so I think you went on a mission to Orion to help them achieve unity, consciousness, and freedom. Okay. And I think even as a Sirian, you came from a unity consciousness, civilization. Okay, so you already have achieved that in your own culture, but you wanted to help achieve that for the Orion people. So I think those are like qualities that even today are really important for you, like freedom and sovereignty and having this unified, bringing people all together. And even maybe in some of your corporate jobs, maybe this was your mission. Maybe this was your mission statement. That I want people to be happy and to be free. I want to achieve this, even if it wasn't the mission statement, say, of the corporation you were working for. Okay, but yeah, I'm kind of seeing. I think you got involved. I think at this point you had risen up the ranks of the Federation. So I think you had gotten, I think, past being in charge of computers or their whatever systems that they had, and you were more in an even bigger leadership role. So I think you were interfacing with quite a few of the Orion leaders, trying to figure out how can we bring this star system together? How can we find common ground, within all these different, groups. Orion was what I call the melting pot of the galaxy because Orion had a mix of many different races. So it wasn't just humans. There was a lot of reptilians that lived in Orion. There was gray aliens, insectoid beings, amphibian beings that lived in Orion. So I always like to jokingly compare Orion to the original Star Wars movie and the cantina scene where they kind of walked in and there was all these different creatures in the cantina drinking, that's what Orion was like. It was a hodgepodge of different types of beings, and Sirians were used to diversity, I think, because they also had different beings in Sirius, so it wasn't like a big shock for you. There was reptilian beings in Sirius. They had cat people that lived in Sirius. I mean, it was like a hodgepodge of beings there too. I always like to compare Sirius to living through Lord of the Rings or experiencing Lord of the Rings. It was kind of a lot. It was kind of mystical and magical in a way. It was very watery planets, though. And so a lot of Sirians, I think, come in with, Sirian starseeds. They come in with very watery elements to their personality. Okay. Now there is a spiritual component to you. I think part of your journey, I think, in this lifetime is to integrate some of that spirituality that I think you haven't been able to before. And maybe this is why you've gone on this mission of becoming a business coach or a life coach, because it's a means for you to be of service to others, but also to integrate the more spiritual concepts that you felt like you had to leave behind in some of your previous incarnations. Okay, so you're also on your own, I think, path of evolution. So not only are you helping others on theirs, but you're also on your own path of integration and evolution. I do think you did go through the Sirian mystery schools. I think most Sirians did, actually. And the Sirian mystery schools, let me explain what that is. And then we'll kind of hit planet Earth after this. But the Sirian mystery schools, when the Sirians, when they were developing their culture, for them, knowledge is power. Okay, for them, they felt like, during the Lyra Draconian Wars that our ancestors went through, there was a lot of information that was lost during the wars. We need to recapture that and encapsulate it into our society, keep it safe. So that's why they were spending all these missions going to different star systems. They were trying to bring back information. So I guess when they felt like they had gotten a lot of information, they decided, hey, let's create a school. We can share this information. And so the Sirian mystery schools were mostly based on high-level spiritual concepts. There was science and math, history. They taught universal law. And they also taught a number of healing modalities. That's why a lot of Sirians are geared towards healing. Most of them are healers and teachers. You're more of the Sirian, I think, personality that's more administrative and technology driven, which I do get some Sirians that fall in that category. So more of a father god representation of that group. But I think because you wanted to be well integrated, you went through the Sirian mystery schools. And they were kind of hard. They were not easy schools. You were taught to develop, I think, your own personal skill sets. And then they would throw you into these simulated scenarios with no information, no direction. Here's a problem. Here, you're in this simulation, like a hologram, and you got to solve an outbreak, or you got to solve, these issues that these people are having, and so it's kind of like the Hunger Games without all the killing. Okay, so you're trying to save people, not kill them, but. Sometimes they would use like obstacles and puzzles. I still to this day have dreams about the Sirian mystery school. They were always like these weird puzzles or weird scenarios and I think they were trying to teach us to think on our feet and to try to figure out things without a lot of background information. So it was kind of like, here's your toolkit. Okay, we're going to put you in the scenario, and then you're just going to figure things out on your own. Because I think they knew that we were going to be incarnating in a bunch of other star systems and not know what we were doing, okay, or not remember why we were there. But let's see, I think, you went through the schools, you graduated the schools, and I think at that point you decided that you wanted to get involved with the Earth Ascension Project, okay, so this was the next big project that after Orion. So a lot of us got involved with Orion. Orion achieved unity consciousness finally. They finally, they don't have wars there anymore, like constant wars and battles. So, they finally achieved what I think we're trying to achieve here on Earth right now. So as a soul, and maybe this was a group decision, so maybe you and your soul group, which included your father and maybe some other members of your family, decided, hey, if we're going to all be part of this Earth Ascension Project, let's all stay connected. So it's not uncommon for souls to oftentimes have soul contracts with members of family that you guys show up in lifetimes together. Okay, so it's not uncommon at all. So you probably, knew members of your family from past lives. Okay, and kind of what I'm seeing is I do think you contracted for X amount of lives on Earth. Okay, so this isn't your first incarnation on Earth. I think you've had a few, probably, I wouldn't say hundreds, but maybe quite a few. Okay. Most Sirian starseeds are so devoted to Earth that they spend lifetimes on Earth. Unlike maybe some Andromedan or Arcturian starseeds that maybe they just have 1 or 2 or 3 lifetimes on Earth, and then they incarnate in this lifetime. Most Sirian starseeds feel like Earth is their second home. They feel very devoted to Earth. They kind of see Earth like a little sister or something, and so they sign up for multiple lifetimes on Earth. Okay, so I think you've been on Earth for a while. Okay, I think you know how to navigate through Earth reality much better than I do. Okay, so because I haven't had very many prior lives on Earth, I think only a handful, but you've been on Earth for quite a bit. I'm trying to see. I'm not seeing Lemurian. So there was 2 cultures that I think early cultures before ancient times. There was Lemuria, which was in Pacific Rim. I think you're more Atlantean, so I think you had incarnations in Atlantis. Okay, I think your dad had 1 lifetime in Lemuria and 1 lifetime in Atlantis. So I think you connected with him in Atlantis. And trying to see what you were involved with in Atlantis. And I am keeping an eye on the time, so I'll let you know when we get kind of close. But Atlantis, I think, was kind of like the representation of Father God consciousness, which was more divine masculine, supposed to be divine masculine, and becoming very patriarchal. But Atlantis was supposed to represent advancement through technology. Okay, so it was. I think Atlantis was a natural fit for you. Lemuria was more advancement through spirituality and healing. Okay, that's not your path. Okay, so you didn't choose to incarnate in Lemuria, but so I think in Atlantis, I'm trying to. I think you were some sort of a scientist, actually, which is kind of interesting. But instead of, I think, working with systems, I think you were a biological scientist. So that was interesting, which is not your usual wheelhouse, okay? That's not what you're usually working in. But for some reason, I think you chose that path because I think you wanted to understand the human physicality. I think you wanted to understand physicality as a whole, okay? And so you were working in the biological sciences. And kind of what I'm seeing is there was some initial experimentations that were involving, I think, genetic modification, okay, which I think started off kind of innocently enough. You know, like, oh, let's see if we can combine this genetic and this genetic, make something better, okay, which seemed okay at the time. But then I think some of these Atlantean scientists, they got a little out of hand, okay? They were getting a little too crazy with experimentations. They were starting to combine human DNA with animal DNA, and they were creating these monstrosities. And I think you had a problem with that. For you, it didn't, I mean, because you went through the Sirian mystery schools, you knew about the natural order of things, how the universal laws, and you felt like that was against universal law. It was violating the law of free will. Remember that freedom and sovereignty are like your key words, okay? So you had a problem, I think, with some of the experimentations that were occurring. I do think in that lifetime, you openly spoke out against your colleagues, and you got punished for it. Okay. For you, I think with you, you're somebody, you're not afraid to speak out. I think when something's wrong, you're kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to stay here and stay silent. I'm going to speak out. Okay, because it's not right, and I think people should know. And you didn't have like the Lyra traumas behind you. So you didn't go through lifetimes of trauma. So you were like, so what's going to happen to me if I speak out? I mean, you did it before in past lives. People used to listen to you. But in Atlantis, because it became so patriarchal and so controlled, you did get punished for it. And I think it wasn't like they killed you or anything like that. I think it was more like you got stripped of your scientific duties, or you got fired, or, it was kind of like that. So I think you spent the rest of your lifetime as an activist speaking out against unlawful or, experimentations. Okay, so you became like this activist. So this kind of ties in with your second wave volunteer personality, that you're somebody that you come in to make changes. You're somebody that if something's wrong, you're going to speak out against it. Okay. So this is your personality. Okay. Throughout, let's see. So you had that Atlantean life. That was, and actually, I think you were always against the government. It was interesting. You were always fighting against the government. It was always like you were, you're poking at them, like, hey, that's not right. That's not right. So you are a little bit rebellious against authority, I think. I think it's like it's that indigo child energy. Like, I'm going to push their button. I'm going to change them because they're what they're doing. They're taking advantage of people. So, and in Atlantis, I mean, they were totally taking advantage. I mean, it was not right what they were doing. I mean, the monstrosities. I mean, just I think a lot of these, crazy creatures that we hear about in mythology were probably Atlantean experiments gone wrong. But yeah, I think that was your biggest platform in that lifetime. And then you had incarnations in Egypt. Now, because you're a Sirian starseed, most Sirians have this deep connection with Egypt. Okay, so I'm seeing that in some of your lifetimes, I think you incarnated as female and some as male. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think sometimes I think it was based on the culture and maybe what you were trying to accomplish. Maybe it was easier to do that as a male. Uh, and obviously, in this lifetime, those of us that carry more feminine energy feel safer being female in this life because the culture has changed. But yeah, I kind of see trying to see what happened to you in Egypt. Oh, interesting. Yeah, some of this kind of correlates with some of the work that you did in this life. Uh, I think you were a male in one of your lives, and you were involved with some big construction projects. Like you designed, like you were kind of like an architect or designer. You didn't do the actual construction part of it, but you would kind of oversee it. Like, hey, this is going to plan, or that sort of thing. So you have a lot of managerial abilities from lives from past lives. Okay. I mean, including the off-world ones, but and kind of what I'm seeing is, I think you were involved with. It wasn't the pyramids or the big monuments, but it was like expanding some of the cities. So it was creating, housing and different spaces, for people to live in. Okay. And it was a massive project because you had to do it in the desert. Okay, it was like, and the only water came from the Nile. Okay, so it's like you're relying on, I think, a lot of irrigation from the Nile, but it's so you're creating like urban spaces. Okay, and um, and I think things went well. But I think you had a lot of responsibility, and kind of what I'm seeing is I think the responsibilities were so great that I think you were starting to get ill, even as a young person. I think you were fairly young, like maybe 30s or 40s, because you felt like you had a lot of responsibility, and there was a lot of, I think, pressure on you to get things exactly right, and so I think you were coming down with some illnesses, even early on. Okay. Which I think impacted, I think, your ability to work long hours. So you had to kind of cut back, and you had to, I think, train some other people to kind of, stand in for you when you couldn't do the work. Okay. So this was, I think, part where you were learning delegation. I don't think you're somebody that likes to delegate very easily. Okay. I think a lot of times you're kind of like me. You figure, hey, I can do it myself a lot easier. Um, but I think this was it was almost like you had to delegate, and some of your, I think, subordinates were better than others. Okay, so that created its own stress.
Yeah.
But the Egyptian life was kind of important for you because you were helping to build this civilization to the greatness that it became. Okay. But I think your interest was in not just creating massive monuments for the great pharaohs. I mean, I think you wanted to create actual practical living spaces for everybody, so everybody could have a comfortable place to live. Okay. And everybody could be all. I think this was the part of this equality that you're all about. And then I'm also seeing another second lifetime in Egypt. This was later on in Egypt. I think you were male in that life too. Uh, I think you were an advisor to one of the Ptolemies. So these were the the Greek family that kind of took over, ruling Egypt. So you weren't even, I think you were Egyptian, but I think you had studied abroad in Greece, and I think some other parts of the Mediterranean world at the time. So you were highly educated, and you came back to Egypt. And I think your purpose was always, or your intentions were always of the highest. I think you wanted to see Egypt succeed. And so I think you did so you advised, I think, some of the Ptolemies that were in rule, during this was latter part of Egyptian history. I think during the time that I think you were, during that lifetime, I think Egypt, I think, was overtaken by the Roman, the Romans, the Roman Empire. So I think you ended up, I think, escaping to some other part of, not Egypt, but maybe some other part of the Mediterranean, because you knew if you would have stayed in Egypt, you would have gotten killed because you were associated with the dynasty of that time. So you almost had to, escape. I do see you as being a survivor. I think, regardless of the lives that you've had, you're always kind of like, you know what, I want to be of service to others, but I also have to look out for myself. So, not that you're jumping ship, but, kind of like, if I have to jump ship, I have to jump ship. It's like, I'm not going to go down with the ship, So, so I don't think you're afraid to cut your losses. Okay. I think this has always been part of your personality, that I think you'll ride something out as long as it benefits others and it benefits you. But if it gets to the point where, this is not really serving anything, or it's not serving me, it's not serving the greater good, I'm not going to be a part of it anymore. Okay. And I think this is what you felt about the Ptolemy dynasty, that it just wasn't, I think when Cleopatra went down, when she went down, that was the end of the Egyptian civilization at that point. It was no longer the same. I think part of your mission throughout and we're going to talk about a couple of other Earth lives, but part of your mission, and I think in your incarnations on Earth, is to help push the Earth evolution forward, mostly through organization and through technology. Okay, so that's always been your mission. Okay, because I think probably when the Sirians were first visiting Earth, they were probably like, "Wow, this is a really primitive planet, needs some help." They're really behind, and so I think instead of taking the spiritual path, which was, I'm going to be a healer and a teacher, which, that could have been the path you could have taken, but you felt like, well, there's a lot of people from Sirius that's doing that already. I want to help them with their technology and their social evolution. Okay. So let me see some other lives. I do see lives in England. I know that's part of your genetics in this life, but I do see a connection with Northern Europe, particularly Great Britain. Let's see. Interesting. Some of your lives you were female and some you were male. And I would say in the times where I don't think if you're going to incarnate as female, I don't think you're going to be somebody that sat around and just took care of kids and was going to be a wife. Okay. So I think if you were going to incarnate in a certain timeline, you had to be doing something, okay, beyond what was available to women at that time. Okay. So I think that's why sometimes you chose to incarnate as male, because sometimes it was just easier to be male. And, but I do think your core essence is more feminine. Okay. but I think sometimes you express divine masculine qualities because it serves a purpose. Okay. Let me see what. So I kind of see. This was around King Arthurian times. This is interesting. I think both you and your dad have a connection to the King Arthur times. Okay. It's like either your genetics in this lifetime date back to some family groups from that period, or there's because kind of what I'm seeing with both you and your dad is and maybe some other people in your family group, is that I think you guys have a genetic connection with Merlin. Okay. I think Merlin was actually extraterrestrial. I think he wasn't even, he may have appeared human, but I think he probably came from some other planet trying to push the evolution of society forward. And because he probably worked with a lot of advanced technology, people thought he was a magician. Okay. And I think Merlin had a lot of lovers. I think he spread his seed throughout much of Great Britain and maybe even France. Okay, but I think both you and your dad have a genetic connection with Merlin. Okay. There's also, I think, a connection with your family. I think your family is the Stuarts. Aren't they pretty prominent in Scotland? So your dad's from the Stuart line, which is fairly prominent. It's a prominent family in Scotland. And there were some of these prominent families that I think they had connections with certain very key people, big people from history. And I think Mary Magdalene is another one of those people. Your dad had this galactic astrology chart done. This was about a couple of years ago. And Merlin and Mary Magdalene figured very heavily in his chart. And the astrologer told him that he was a progeny of this lineage. Okay, that he had this very elevated lineage. Okay, which then I think also connects with you. Okay, and so I think there was certain. I believe that when Jesus died on the cross, that he didn't really die. People thought, he was crucified and then was risen from the dead. I think they hid him away, and he continued living maybe in India or Tibet for a while, and then he and Mary Magdalene got married and had kids. Okay, and their children were, I think, it spread out to Europe, and they became, the ancestors of some of these prominent families throughout Europe. Okay. And some of them being in the UK. Kind of what I'm seeing that you did during that time, I think you weren't one of the Knights of the Round Table, but I think you were aristocratic. I think you were a knight of some sort anyway. And I think you did get involved with the crusades. Okay. I think at first you got caught up with the whole idealism of the crusades, like, we're going to spread Christianity throughout the different parts of the world. But then I think as you got into it, you kind of saw, the darker side of that whole war. And you felt, I think, kind of like, wow, I really signed up for something that isn't what I thought it was going to be. Okay. And I think by the time you ended up, returning from the wars, you felt like really, betrayed, or if you felt kind of like, what did we really accomplish in the Middle East? It was like, we just killed a bunch of people. It's like, what is that going to do for anything? And interestingly enough, Jesus, I think, is actually a Sirian starseed. I think he originated from Sirius as well. He's an ascended master. He might have even been your teacher in the Sirian mystery schools, because a lot of the ascended masters were teachers in the Sirian mystery schools. And I think maybe part of your idealistic part of you thought, Jeshua is from my star system. He's trying to preach love and unification. That's what I'm about too. So if the crusades are going to help promote that, then I'm going to then I'm going to go ahead and go forward with that. Okay. But then you saw that there was a whole other agenda behind it. Okay. And it was kind of, I think, a learning process for you that, hey, things that are not always what they seem, especially when it comes to religion, and I think for this reason, I think you're very suspicious of religion in this day. I think you're a spiritual person, but I don't think you follow any religious dogma, because a lot of them are corrupted. Okay, it's like you have this sense about, hey, this is not really in place to help humanity. It's in place for control, and I'm not about that. I'm about the free will and freedom, part of things. So I want people to be free to believe what they want to believe. But yeah, that was kind of an interesting life, because I think you learned a lot. And I think you came back to England very changed. I think you felt a little bit more cynical, maybe, about certain things. Definitely about the government, but certainly about religion as well. So I think Atlantis, you learned to distrust the government, and in Arthurian England, you learned to distrust religion. So, I think in latter years, in your more recent lives, I think you started incarnating as female again. So you kind of felt like, okay, now I can work towards go back to my the gender I feel a little more comfortable in. Okay, and let me see if there's any recent lives that are kind of showing up. And I am looking at the time, so. Actually, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to have time to go into that. I want to focus in on life purpose. And if you ever decide like you want to get deeper into some of these Earth lives, we can always do another session. But I'm looking at the time. We only have about 5 minutes left. Let's focus in on life mission in this life, okay? Because I know that's always a question that most of us have. So I do think is the first part of your life, kind of like with me, you had to work the corporate world in order to understand it. Okay, so you understand the structure, you understand the culture. But I actually think that what you came here to do is to change the workplace structure to where it's more facilitative, it's more inclusive, it's not so hierarchical. It's there's more, I think, balance, and I think you'll be doing this as a contract worker to a certain extent, but I think part of the work that you're going to be doing, I think this new venture that you're going into with the business coaching is going to be kind of like the focal point in a few years. Okay, where I see you. I think you're going to create a whole new process around it, where I think you'll be speaking at different conferences. I see you becoming like the face of the new workspace structure. that's going to be more of a 5D structure and not a 3D structure. Okay. Of course, you had to work in that for a few years to understand it and understand the pitfalls of the current structure. Okay. And I don't know if anything I'm saying is aligning with you, but
yeah, it resonates for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of what you've said over the course of the hour has resonated.
Yeah. But I see you wanting to make it more equitable for women, or making it more, have women have more opportunities, being able to empower people to maybe become entrepreneurs, or to become, to follow their dreams, to be able to create their own businesses and do quite well with it. And I see you writing a book and, going out into the conference circuit. I think maybe doing a TED Talk or two. I kind of see you expanding with this. I don't know if this is your plan, but that's what I'm seeing. Okay. So I think Jennifer is going to become really pretty well known and famous in the next few years. Maybe, and it's not that you're seeking fame, it's just that you're seeking changing the structure of work to where, these corporations aren't taking advantage of people anymore, where people are co-owners instead of, just working for, this group up here, So that's what I see you going towards, okay? And it's going to have, I think, an exponential effect on not just people like myself that are trying to, run our own businesses, but also on corporate work structures. And I see you getting called in to train. Maybe you're going to do some, contract work where you're going to be helping to restructure some of these corporations to where it is becoming more inclusive and more facilitative and less patriarchal. So you are here to, I think, integrate some divine feminine aspects of work that are, I think, will not overtake the masculine, but kind of help balance it out. Okay, so.
Yeah, that resonates. I mean, but it's interesting that you're saying that, because I agree with you. I'm not seeking this crazy, I don't know. That what you see, it's like, as you say it, I get a little anxiety about it, because I'm just like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I think your guides, you have some wonderful ascended master guides, and Sirian guides are going to help guide you towards that process. And Sirian guides tend to be more process oriented, so they're not going to throw it all on you at once. But yeah, it is a little bit anxiety. Me just going on Gaia was anxiety ridden for me, because I knew that my life was going to change after that. I'm seeing TED Talks, and I don't know, I'm just seeing, so you're no longer going to be behind the scenes, you're going to be in the forefront, which I think is a big step. So yeah, it's a big step. I'm excited, actually. I can't wait to see the work structure change in this, in our Western world. It needs to change. Yeah.
I agree.
We are at the end of our time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I'm going to do a closing prayer just to shut down your records, and then we'll wrap things up. I'll send you the recording along with the Sirian podcast. Okay.
Thanks.
I would like to thank the masters, teachers, and loved ones for their love and compassion. I would like to thank the lords of the Akashic records for their point of view, and I would like to thank the Holy Spirit of Light for all knowledge and healing. The records are now closed. Amen. The records are now closed. Amen. The records are now closed. Amen. Your energy goes with you, and my energy stays with me.